Hey there, and welcome to Write for Joy, the podcast. I'm Renee Long, a creative writer, water baby, and writing coach. I help aspiring creative writers like you create a consistent and procrastination-free writing habit that feels amazing. If you're finally ready to sit down, write, and joyfully finish the stories tugging at your heart, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome to episode 6 of the Joyful Writing Goals series, a series of 7 podcast episodes on joyful goal setting for creative writers. This podcast series takes you through every step of the Wheel of Joyful Writing Goals, aka ICPCS. It's my proprietary process that helps you know exactly what you need to do to start and finish creative writing projects with ease, consistency, and joy. As a quick refresher, the Wheel of Joyful Writing Goals looks like, you guessed it, a wheel split into 5 pieces. Starting from the left and going clockwise around, we have identity, clear vision, presence, compassion, and sustenance. For today's episode, we're diving in to the 5th and final section of the framework, Sustenance. This part of the wheel is all about making your journey as smooth, joyful, and sustainable as possible. I like to think of it like this. If you were dropped into the middle of the woods with nothing but the clothes on your back, theoretically, with the right knowledge, you could survive. You could look for clean water, create a fire by rubbing sticks together or rocks, and you could probably build a rustic shelter. But unless you're into that kind of extreme survival lifestyle like Bear Grylls or Survivor Man, you're probably not going to have a great time enjoying the great outdoors or the journey getting back home, right? You would be fully focused on get me out of here, I want to go home, and you'd be so focused on that, you would have no desire, you wouldn't even think about looking at the different things in the wilderness or enjoying the process, right? Again, unless you were Bear Grylls or somebody like that. And so sustenance is all the tools in your backpack that you would use on your journey to make it easeful, joyful, and sustainable. Okay, so now think of this second scenario. Imagine that you are getting dropped in the woods, but now you have a backpack with a compass, a satellite phone, a water purifier, some fire starters, plenty of food, and an all-weather tent, right? You're good to go. That journey is going to be much more joyful, sustainable, and you'll be able to focus on the process of getting home and the journey and even enjoying it versus your one goal of being survival. So when I talk about sustenance in relation to your writing practice, I'm talking about any and all ways that support you on your journey so it feels less like you're running away from a hungry bear and more like you're on a fun, exuberant hike that feels amazing, right? So sustenance is your backpack full of tools. Sure, you can do it the hard way, but why? Why would you want to do it without your backpack, right? All right, so before we dive in, go ahead and don't forget to download your Joyful Goals workbook for this section. The workbook includes illustrations that can help you visualize this framework, as well as exercises and writing prompts to help you implement the concepts we're covering in this series. Go get your workbook at writeforjoy.co/joyful-goals-2023, and I'll also link to that page below this episode. Go get that workbook. All right. So let's talk about sustenance. Why is sustenance so important? Why is it included as an important part of the wheel? So in the same way that you can survive being dropped in the middle of the woods and make it home, most of us don't want our writing routine to feel that do or die, right? We don't want to feel like we're in survival mode, right? Most of us want writing to feel easeful, not necessarily easy, not like we're not doing anything worthwhile or just that was easy. And we kind of want it to feel, at least I want it to feel, and I know many of my clients want it to feel, we want it to feel the same way that a good hike in the woods can feel, rejuvenating and cleansing, or a good, and not in so much intense, but a good juicy yoga practice feels rejuvenating, cleansing, inspiring. We want our writing routine to feel both challenging, exciting, and like we're in flow, not like we are doing the impossible, right? And so let me go ahead and define sustenance as simply as possible. So, sustenance, in my definition, is any strategy, tool, or mindset shift that feels supportive and brings more ease and reduces friction in your writing routine, right? So it brings more ease, it's supportive, and it reduces friction. So let's talk a little bit about friction versus the opposite, which I would say is flow when we're talking about our writing routine and our goals, right? So friction happens anytime when we procrastinate, we get distracted, we get stuck in self-doubt, the inner critic shows up and slows us down, or perhaps we get bogged down in the tedium around our writing routine, like, oh, I don't really like my writing desk, so I'm not really drawn to writing there, right? And so if we think about our wheel of joyful writing goals, it's a wheel, right? And when things get caught in a wheel, we call that friction. Or if a wheel hits a roadblock, we call that friction. So friction is anything that slows down or stops the wheel from spinning. And I do have to give a shout out to HubSpot's flywheel model, which they're the first like kind of wheel model that I saw that talks about friction, and that friction is anything that slows down or stops the wheel from spinning. So shout out to the flywheel. And you can probably guess the biggest external culprit that creates friction. So think about the things in the external world that distract you from writing. I bet you can probably think the biggest culprit. So take a second to think about it. All right, so you probably guessed right. It's social media, or really any of our devices, right? All of our black mirrors. Those are our biggest culprits, at least externally, that create friction. So tell me if this sounds familiar. You plan to write for 25 minutes every weekday at 8 a.m. Maybe the first few days you're riding high on all that new goal energy. But week 3 starts to roll around, and here comes the self-doubt, the fatigue, and those inner criticisms start to really barrage you, right? You go to sit down at the computer to write, but you're feeling kind of tired, kind of bored with your story. Overall, you are just not in the mood to write. You think, I'll just check and see what's going on TikTok. That'll put me in a better mood. Next thing you know, your 25 minutes are up, and it's time to leave for work. Right? Has that happened to you? It's definitely happened to me. Or even worse, maybe you weren't even feeling tired or bored. Maybe you were super, super pumped to start writing, all of this excited, vibrating energy. And that creative energy was so strong that you're like, I just need to like chill out for a second before I really dive in here. Let me just check and see what's going on Instagram. And then 25 minutes later, your writing time is gone, and along with that inspired mood, because it's time to go to work, it's time to go do something else. I only allotted 25 minutes here, which, to be fair, and we'll talk about this in a second, 25 minutes is plenty of time to write if you're writing every day, or if you're writing 3 times a week, or even once a week. Doesn't matter, you're writing, right? Remember we talked about the episode on identity. Doesn't matter how much you write. If you write, you are a writer. So that 25 minutes doesn't matter here. It's the fact that instead of writing, we get pulled into these distractions. And it's not necessarily your fault at all, because these things are built to be distractions. They are literally distractions by design. So there's really not a lot of shame here. But it does happen. Can you tell that I'm highly familiar with both of these scenarios? And I also want to point out there's a really deep and rich conversation to be had about the psychological root of distractions. There's a lot going on behind the scenes in our brains and with our pasts, and reasons why we create distractions around ourselves, why we give in to distractions, why we procrastinate. There's a lot of really cool, juicy neuroscience and psychological discussions to be had around the topic of distractions. However, and we did did touch a lot on that in the earlier versions or the earlier steps of the wheel. We talked a lot about those inner working pieces. And at the same time, sometimes the answer is very practical, is to remove the distraction. Either remove the distraction or remove yourself from the distraction's presence, right? You can set yourself up for success by blocking social media during your writing time or going to write somewhere where there is no internet access. So, for example, when I was in graduate school and I was working on my graduate thesis, which was a novel, when I was deep in the composition phase of my thesis, of writing that story, I would get in my car and I would drive to the beach where at the time there was no internet. I think now like beaches all have like hotspot Wi-Fi, but at the time there was not. And I would go and I would park by the beach and I would just turn my music on and write for like 45 minutes to an hour, you know, and there was no internet, so I could just literally just like tap into flow. And sometimes, because at the time I was living in Florida, and in South Florida it rains a lot. It's a rainforest area, and I would get these torrential pours, rainstorms, which were really, really fun to kind of turn up my music in the car and kind of just let my fingers fly over the keyboard as I was writing this story about this woman who was kind of solitary on this island. That was partly what my thesis was about. So that was one way that I removed myself from the distraction's presence. And another way to do it is to actually use tools that block social media, block distracting sites, or block the things that you are most distracted by on your device. So I personally use a paid tool called Freedom. If you Google Freedom app, you can probably find it. It's this little green app with like a butterfly logo. It is a paid app, and I decided I wanted to pay for it because I used to use the free version, which only blocks sites on Chrome. So you could only block sites on Chrome. But if I opened up Safari or Firefox or opened up an app on my phone or my computer, it wasn't going to block that. And Freedom blocks whatever you want it to. If you needed to block an app on your phone or your computer, it'll block that. So again, this is not an ad for Freedom. I'm just saying it's my preferred tool for this type of thing. So there are plenty of distraction helping apps out there, or distraction eliminating apps out there. I personally really like Freedom. I will link to a bunch down below. There's another one worth mentioning here that if we're really trying to block all the things that are distracting to you, which I think is actually a good idea, because again, going back to this conversation around that distractions are much more like, it's way less about Facebook and more about you trying to escape discomfort. That's really what distraction is. In some way, you're trying to flee something, some form of discomfort. And so it's not necessarily about the distraction. It is about you trying to escape. And another app that I really like is called Cold Turkey. And so Cold Turkey, I think it's called Cold Turkey Writer is the full name. And it's a free app that turns your computer into a typewriter. So meaning you can open it up and you can type in the settings, and the settings are either, and they may have changed. It's been a while since I've used it because, like I said, I typically use Freedom. But for Cold Turkey, you'll open it up and it'll ask you if you want to set a word count limit or a time limit. And so depending on which limit you set, it's going to put a blank white screen on your computer for either the length of time that you set or the word count that you set. So if you set 1,000 words, your computer is not going to unlock from that blank white page until you hit 1,000 words in the document. It's also, or if you put in 25 minutes, your computer's not going to unlock until you hit that 25-minute deadline. I guess you could game the system either way, but truly Cold Turkey will lock your computer down except for a blank not Word document, but a blank type document, word processor document. And that's all you can do. You can only type into it. So Sometimes I'll use it if I'm feeling like really pulled away by the socials, right? But for me, I prefer freedom. Freedom gets the job done. Because I also have particular tools that I like to write with, such as the Google and Wikipedia, and I like to look at different photos if I'm trying to describe something. I also really rely heavily on my dictionary, so on my computer dictionary. So if cold turkey were to just shut down everything, which is great, again, it basically turns your computer into a typewriter. That is great, but I actually really do like a lot of the internet tools. So I use Freedom to curate a block list and tell it which sites and apps to block specifically. And I add to that anytime I notice myself using something as an escape versus a tool. And it works pretty well for me, but cold turkey or another tool may work great for you. All right, so go ahead again and pull out your pen and paper, pull out your workbook, and I want you to start to think about your distractions. So I'll ask you a few questions here, and then you can go ahead and journal in the workbook or in your journal. And I want you to ask yourself, what distracts you when you want to write? What gets in your way of creative writing? What annoys you the most when sitting down to write? And then finally, just go ahead and make a long list of all the things that irritate you and slow you down in your writing routine. And they can be really random things. It could be like, I don't like the pencils that are in my pencil holder. They're ugly. I hate them. It could be, I don't like that picture in the wall in my office. It's ugly. It's of a clown and I don't like it. It could be, I broke my nail last week and it doesn't make me feel good to write with one short nail, right? So it's go do your nails or go get your nails done and, get that thing taken care of. But first, let's just brain dump all the things that are irritating you or slowing you down in your writing routine. Awesome. All right. So if you need more time, don't hesitate to pause this. You've got plenty of time. There's an abundance of time. You can always come back, but do come back and listen to the rest. So, all right. Now we've got our list of all of these things that distract us from writing, right? Let's go through a couple different scenarios that you may have written down, right? I know I take these from different clients that I work with, also in my own experience, right? So I don't have kids, but this first scenario here I know is a popular one, is that when you're trying to write, your kids barge in and are vying for your attention. Here are some solutions that you could implement as sustenance strategies to make sure that doesn't happen in the future, right? We're eliminating this distraction. Not that children are a distraction, but it's okay to have boundaries. Your children and the children in our lives do not benefit from your martyrdom, right? So with that in mind, you can lock your door. If you don't have a lock on it, I knew of a coach once who, when she was writing her book, she belted her door shut. She took a belt and wrapped it around the knob so her kids couldn't open it. They were supervised, of course. So lock your door, put a sign on the door, and whoever's watching the kids, just give them a heads up. Be like, listen, please go do something with the kids, entertain the kids. I just need 45 minutes, an hour, 25 minutes, whatever your writing time is. That's your time, and you deserve coverage for that time. You can talk to your partner about boundaries. Again, whoever is watching your children during that time, and if you can't barter for 25 minutes to an hour, a week or a month, then there needs to be some conversations, right? You could hire a babysitter for an hour, or you can find another parent at your child's school or a local mom's group, dad's group, parents group, and you could swap babysitting duty with that other parent. So maybe you watch the kids on Saturday for 2 hours, you take them to the park, and then the next day the other parent watches them for 2 hours while you work on your novel. And that 2 hours is at least one of those hours is going to be for writing, not doing the dishes, not emptying all the trash cans. Like, we can find time for that. This is for your writing. All right. Again, I'm not a parent. I know, like, trust me when I say that I cannot imagine the challenges, but there are also solutions to these things as well. All right. You can get texts from, let's say, moving into another scenario. Let's say that when you try to sit down to write, you're always getting text messages from your brother or your partner and you're trying to write. What are some solutions you can do for this distraction? You can put your phone on mute or do not disturb. You can put it in another room. Again, you can talk to these family members about boundaries. You can say, hey, every day at 8 a.m., I'm writing for 25 minutes. So can you please wait till 9 to text me? If your writing time is not consistent like that, or it's not at a consistent time in the day, you can, again, put your phone on D&D, put it in another room. Put an autoresponder on your phone. I know that you can do that for like the car mode. But there is a way to put autoresponders on your text messages. You can Google it. You can figure it out. All right, let's look at a few other scenarios. So let's say your desk is a mess and it's uninspiring. Every time you look at it, you're like, ugh, I don't want to write there. So what are some solutions for this? We could spend the day beautifying your writing space, right? So that it feels magnetizing to you, so that it feels beautiful and inspiring. Or you could go to a coffee shop, you could go to a library or a co-working space to write. You could change up your spaces, right? You could do like I did and write in your car. I actually really, really enjoyed that. It was super fun. Let's say the scenario is you feel lonely and bored when writing. It's like you like being around people. Again, you could go to a co-working space, a coffee shop, where people are around. You could join a writing group and a co-writing group. And just as a little shout out, Write for Joy, the incubator, is coming this year, and it will include three weekly, well, not really weekly, 3 co-writing sessions per month. They're hour-long co-writing sessions, and it's just going to be amazing. So I'd love to see you in the incubator. If you want to know more, you can absolutely reach out to me at renee@writeforjoy.co. I'm happy to tell you all about it. It is coming down the line this spring. I'm super, super excited. So yeah, you could do something like that. Join a co-writing group. You could get some writing buddies and text them when you've started writing and when you've stopped writing, and, ask for support in exchange for your support in return, right? Okay, here's another scenario. Your writing chair is uncomfortable and ugly. Get a new one. Treat yourself. Like, I am always hesitant to say, oh, just throw money at it if there's an issue with your writing practice. However, we buy yoga clothes, right? We buy yoga blocks and yoga mats. We buy Pelotons. We buy all these different things for our exercise routine. Why does your writing routine get the scraps, right? I feel like there's a little bit of an unbalance there. Same thing for our work life. Like, at work, your work attire gets the best, most expensive clothes or the best shoes, right? If you're going to an office, even if you are a restaurant worker, you have to buy specific clothes for your role. Usually it's a special kind of shoes and a special kind of pants. So we do invest in these other things that are important to us. And things that are important to us shouldn't always just be the things that keep us surviving, right? Like our job or our exercise or our food. It can also be things that nourish our souls. So if you hate your writing chair and it's, again, I don't ever want to encourage somebody to go into debt or to spend frivolously, obviously, but I do think that we expect to be paupers when it comes to our art. And in reality, again, it goes back to our like being dropped in the woods with no supplies metaphor. It's like, do you want to be a writer who writes and has no backpack? Or do you want to actually have a really nice backpack with supplies that actually makes you feel like a real writer? So if you hate your writing chair, if you hate your keyboard, if you hate your water bottle, whatever it is, like get a new one, or at the very least, recraft it, repurpose it, refurbish it, reupholster it. That's the word I was looking for. You can reupholster your chair, right? Get a comfy cushion, maybe get some fun fabric, spray paint that thing. You could sell it and then use that money to buy a new chair. There's so many different solutions to, instead of like looking at a horrible chair that hurts your back, squeaks, and is just ugly, right? So again, it doesn't mean you have to spend a ton of money, but honestly, you could probably sell that chair or sell something that you're not using in your home to get enough, to pay for a new chair. But again, like we buy the yoga clothes, we buy the yoga blocks, we buy the Pelotons. Why not also something for your writing? All right, so moving right along, we're still kind of on this topic of distractions because sustenance is really, again, it's all those tools in your backpack that are going to make the journey feel good, but they are also there to really prevent distractions, right? And one of my most favorite and truly most effective techniques for this is using a timer. So the timer is the friend of focus. It is a creator of focus. And I just really encourage you to at least try this once or twice, 3 times if you can, because I truly believe you won't believe the power of the timer until you actually sit down to try it. If you've tried it 3 times and you're like, that doesn't work for me, I don't like it, that's totally fine. But I personally think the timer and really works, and I've seen it work for so many of my writing students. All right, and this is why. So when we sit down to write, our brain goes into a little bit of a fear cycle because we're about to be vulnerable, we're about to be creative, and these things are threats to our brain. And so the brain starts to think, how long am I going to have to sit here? How long am I going to have to generate sentences? This sounds like it's going to be a lot of work, a lot of effort. What if I'm not creative enough? Oh my gosh. And your brain just starts to like spiral out of control. And these are the moments that really we are so vulnerable to clicking open a new tab and checking Facebook, checking Instagram, opening our phone and checking TikTok, checking Slack, like all of these things. Really capitalize on that moment of like, oh my gosh, this is uncomfortable. And so the beauty of the timer is that when you give your brain a bite-sized time frame in which to write, and you use a timer to contain that space, your brain immediately relaxes and it's open to focus. And it's way easier to focus on the work and your writing instead of switching tabs, checking your phone, checking Slack, getting a snack, all of those things. But the important part here is you're not setting a timer for 45 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. No, because your brain is just going to look at that 45 minutes and freak out. And if it's 2 hours, your brain is totally going to freak out and it's not going to want to sit there and write. So I highly, highly recommend, if you are new to using timers or you don't do it habitually, I highly recommend using sprints of 25 minutes or less. Please, 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 if this is not an active practice for you, please do not go over the 25-minute limit, because what's going to happen is you are going to go over that 25-minute limit, or you're going to try to push yourself over that limit, and your brain is going to find a sneaky way to distract you in some other way, such as, like, again, checking Facebook, checking your phone, and you're going to be on Facebook when that 40 minutes timer goes off, and you're going to be frustrated with yourself. At least, again, like, nothing I ever say is a universal truth. I just know it to be a very most likely truth that going over the 25 minutes, if this isn't a habitual practice for you with the timer, is usually a recipe for it not working, right? It's kind of like adding too much salt to a dish. Okay, so break your writing time up into sprints. So let's say you have a goal to write for 30 minutes Monday, Wednesday, Friday. break your writing time up on Monday, Wednesday, Friday into 3 sets of 10-minute sprints. So you write for 10 minutes, then you break for 2 minutes. You write for 10 minutes, you break for 2 minutes. You write for 10 minutes, you're done. That's like the easiest 30 minutes on the planet, and I can guarantee you'll get at least a page and a half of writing. I can almost guarantee it. You can do 2 sets of 25-minute sprints. If you want to do a full, 50 minutes to an hour, do those 25-minute sprints 2 times with a 5-minute break in between. Boom, you're done. Even a 10-minute break in between, you're still under an hour. I can guarantee you're going to get 2 to 3 pages out of that. If you did that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, your novel would probably be done 6 months to a year, or your memoir, or whatever it is you're working on. You could do 5 sets of 8-minute sprints. If you really notice that your brain has a hard time focusing, you could do 8-minute sprints. You could set that timer for 8 minutes, take a 1-minute break, 8 minutes, 1-minute break, and you could do that 5 times until you're done. Again, if you did that consistently over time, again, you'd have a novel done within a year or less. Again, I would say once you've mastered the short sprint, I'm at the point where I can really read into myself as to whether or not I can move past the 25 minutes. So sometimes I will set a timer for 35 minutes. I never go over 35. I'm sure some people can go over into 40. Like maybe if you are a really great meditator, really into yoga, or you have some other kind of focus practice that can get you into deep focus, maybe 40 minutes is a good thing for you. However, again, I really, really recommend starting with the 25 because otherwise your brain is just going to force you to take a break anyway, and you're just going to feel bad about yourself. All right, so it's really all about, if you haven't noticed already, this is really all about creating ease and fortifying your writing practice, right? And this is because in our culture, there's this like gravitas to making things harder on ourselves because we assume that nothing good will come from efforts if it's not hard, torturous work, right? If we didn't write our novel with blood, sweat, and tears, then is it really a novel, right? Is it really worth it? And I want to be here and question that and say, why? Why do we have to pour blood unnecessary, or I'll say, why do we have to pour unnecessary blood, sweat, and tears into our work, right? Why, if we know that we get distracted by TikTok, why do we make it easy for ourselves to get onto TikTok? If we know that we like to write with music, why do we allow like the TV to be on in the next room? So I think of the sustenance piece as, again, your backpack full of tools and nourishment in the wilderness. And I also think of it as the bolster and the blankets and the blocks and the straps that we use in yoga to support ourselves in our practice, right? And it's like, if your knees hurt, put a damn blanket under your knees when you're stretching. I say this as someone who uses blankets in yoga a lot for things that hurt. And you're not a hero by suffering through your writing practice. And there's definitely a difference between expected and healthy pain and discomfort, and the pain of growth and the pain of a stretch and the pain of strength training. And again, I mean that both metaphorically and literally. I mean, even when we're doing yoga or we're hiking, there's a difference between hiking on a broken ankle and hiking and having your feet hurt because you've been hiking for 10 miles. And there's a difference between, writing in the most unoptimal conditions with like everybody's screaming around you or your phone going off and all of these things. There's a difference between that and the natural discomfort of creativity. Creativity does come with a natural discomfort, as does everything worth doing in life has a natural discomfort. But in our culture, we think there is some heroic value into layering on even more difficulty than there needs to be, right? And so sustenance is all about removing that extra difficulty and adding in things that are going to make things more easeful. And it's also about adding pleasure and joy. So how can you make your writing practice more fun? What elements can you add to your process that are delightful and nourishing? Maybe it's taking an artist date once a month. I'll link to the video of Julia Cameron and artist dates below, but you can even just Google Julia Cameron artist date. And you can do that once a month or once a quarter. Maybe it's adding fresh flowers or a special candle to your writing space. I recently bought some special candles for myself that I'm only going to be lighting when I'm writing. And it's kind of like keeping the flame alive, right? Maybe it means getting a special, comfy, beautiful outfit for your writing sessions. Maybe it means getting a really cool power suit that you feel like a total badass professional writer in, or maybe it's getting a really comfy, soft athleisure outfit that you feel really inspired and flowy in. Maybe if you're like a crafty person, you can create a board game for your novel, and every time you write a chapter, your player advances a space, right? So there's all these different things you can do generated from your own creativity that can spark delight and allow your writing time to feel delightful. So that's another thing to add on that would be considered sustenance. It's kind of like, again, if we're thinking about the hiker with a backpack full of tools, that adding joy could be like a novel in your backpack. Like, don't you want something to read on your hike when you're in your tent? You know, I certainly do. I love to read when I'm camping. And then think about, how do you write best? So your sustenance strategies are going to look different from mine, in the same way that every hiker, backpacker's backpack is going to have similar tools, yet different brands and different tools in it. You're going to have a different tent from me. You're going to have a different water filter from me, a different satellite phone, like all these different things. I may be using a GPS. You may be using a compass and an atlas. Like, everybody's going to be different, right? And so maybe you are better at dictating your story than writing it by hand or typing it. You can dictate into Google or the app Dragon Naturally Speaking and dictate your story. You can also, maybe you prefer handwriting, but you don't necessarily want to write on paper and then hire somebody to transcribe it, and it's a whole thing. You could get a Remarkable tablet. I just recently got a Remarkable tablet and I love it. You could get a Remarkable or a Scribe tablet. I think that's Amazon's tablet. Or you can get just like an iPad or something regular like that. And all of those things, I'm not 100% sure about the iPad. I'm pretty sure it does this, but I know my Remarkable will translate my handwriting into text, which is pretty cool. Again, I prefer to type when I'm creatively writing. Sometimes I'll write by hand if I'm trying to get something out, but I don't necessarily mind transcribing it later. But I know some folks are like, I only want to handwrite, and transcribing can be a pain in the butt. So maybe that means you invest in a tablet, and that's okay, right? We invest in our food, we invest in our homes, we invest in our exercise routines. Why wouldn't we invest in our practice? And okay, so sustenance is personal to you. All right, so 3 ways, again, just as a recap of sustenance, is to remove what slows you down and gets you stuck. Again, we're removing that friction that gets stuck in the wheel. We're going to add in what brings you joy, delight, and ease, right? So if we're doing a strenuous yoga workout, you're adding in some straps, some bolsters, some blocks, things like that. And you're going to make it personal to you, right? So forget what you think a writing practice is supposed to look like and add things that make it more easeful for you. Writing already comes with its own degree of challenge and difficulty and discomfort. You don't need to layer on more, right? And so with every step in this wheel, we're also wanting to remember to be compassionate as we curate these sustenance tool bags, right? Tool bags, sorry. It's a funny word, but I just had to go there. And not every sustenance tool or strategy is going to work for you, and that's okay. Test and tweak and keep trying. Don't give up on a strategy just because it didn't work the first time. Give it a couple times to try it and see if it again, push past the natural discomfort of learning something new and give something a real try before you say, okay, that's not for me. And then finally, be compassionate with your creative heart. Your creative heart is only trying to help you be your best, most self-expressed version of yourself. So be gentle, be kind. All right. Now it is time to take this work deeper. I love podcast episodes and digital trainings, and I also know it's super easy to just listen and not actually integrate anything you've learned into action. In the workbook for this episode, I've included reflection questions on sustenance, so you can start practicing this tool that will help you bolster your practice and eliminate those distractions. Go get your workbook at writeforjoy.co/joyful-goals-2023. And if you've already signed up there, then you'll have the workbook in your email, no worries. If you have any trouble accessing the workbook, email me at renee@writeforjoy.co. I'm happy to help. I am so honored that you are joining me for the Joyful Writing Goals series, and I'll see you in the next episode where we'll bring all 5 parts of the wheel together. We'll talk about using the wheel of joyful writing goals repeatedly so you can start and finish creative writing projects, and you're constantly creating a portfolio of quality work and feeling great while doing it. I'll see you there. I hope this message was inspiring to you and you're ready to tap into flow and release the stories tugging at your heart. I encourage you to share this episode with a creative or writerly friend or loved one who may need a boost of creative confidence. For more episodes and letters of encouragement like this one, please subscribe below or at writeforjoy.co/subscribe. That's writeforjoy.co/subscribe. Thank you so much for listening and happy writing.